Hi, I'm Praveen Shetty and I welcome you to this video class. In my previous video class, I discussed transition age and the features of transition age. In this PPT, I would like to talk about Blake as a transition poet and the features of his poetry. William Blake was an English poet and he lived between 1757 and 1827. He was a painter and a printmaker. He was also a visionary and he was very creative in his work. And in his poems, you can find philosophical and mystical elements. And his paintings and poetry have been characterized as pre romantic because they don't actually belong to Romantic age, neither do they belong to the 18th century Augustan age. So it comes in between the Augustan age and Romantic age, and he's called as pre-Romantic. Then he was influenced by the ideals of French and American revolutions. His major works are poetical sketches written in 1783, and these the poems in this collection, they imitate the classical models, and to a certain extent, um, uh, Blake followed the traditions of 18th century, who followed or who took Greek and Roman poets as their models. So here he was imitating the classical models. If you look at this poem Spring, you can see that there is an illustration, and in this picture you have a blue sky and white clouds, and there is a green tree, and there's a woman holding a child, and then lambs grazing. So you can see that there's a significant movement away from the themes of uh, 18th century. And another important work of William Blake uh, is Songs of Innocence, written in 1789, and we have another one which is written in 1794, and that's called Songs of Experience. So, in Songs of Innocence, he talks about goodness, bounty, and innocence. On the other hand, in Songs of Experience, he talks about the darker side of life, the starvation and oppression. And here we have mm, two illustrations. One is on lamb, and another one is on tiger. And um, the Songs of Innocence and Songs of Experience contain poems which are titled alike. So, for example, you have the poem Lamb in the Songs of Innocence, and the same poem or the title, same a poem with the same title is also found in Songs of Experience. But they are two different lambs, or the two different poems on lambs. And these two collections of poems appear to be contrasting in nature, but I think that is how Blake tries to present life. So our life is itself a contrast. You have darkness and light, you have happiness and sadness, and you find the similar thing presented in Songs of Innocence and Songs of Experience. Then Blake's other major works are The Marriage of Hell and Heaven and Hell, which was written in between 1790 and 93. This shows how authority oppresses the church, authority oppresses the people, especially the church and the state, and he satirizes the oppressive authority of these two institutions. Then in the poem Jerusalem, written in 1804, is a longest prophetic book that Blake wrote. Um, Another poem that was written by Blake was on Milton. So the title of the poem is Milton, and it was written in between 1804 and 10. And it's an epic poem which talks about Milton returning from heaven and uniting with Blake to explore the living writer's relationship with the writers who came before them. Now let us look how Blake can be considered as a transition poet. We know that Blake cannot be classified as Augustan poet or a poet of the 18th century, and at the same time, he cannot be considered as a romantic poet. He comes in between these two periods, and he falls into this transition age. So um, you find that there are lots of features of transition age in Blake's poetry, and one of them is the new subject and simple themes. For example, in the poems "The Lamb" or "The Chimney Sweeper," Blake idealizes young children. Then, in his poems, you find love for the countryside, which is also a feature of the transition age. He depicts the life of the people in the villages or in the rural setting. Then he shows no satisfaction for urban life. Most of his poems portray city as a place of harsh and destructive elements. So that is due to industrialization. Then he shows interest in the medieval and the Gothic. The poems like "The Garden of Love" shows garden as full of graves, and it is guarded by some dark figures. Uh, then we also find some strong emotions and imaginations in his poems. For example, in the poem "The Tiger," it begins like "Tiger, tiger, burning bright in the forest of the night, what immortal hand or eye could frame thy fearful symmetry?" So, in these lines, you can find that there is some strong emotion and imagination expressed. Then, another significant element of transition age is the supernatural element, and you can find this in the poem "The Chimney Sweepers." And when chimney sweepers are all locked in the coffins, there was an angel who comes and opens with a golden key. So this is something supernatural which does not happen in day-to-day life. Then, like most transition poets, Blake too showed a lot of interest in nature. His poem "The Echoing Green" shows his oneness with nature. So he says, "The sun does arise and make happy the skies, the merry bells ring to welcome the spring." Then let us look at the features of Blake's poetry. So Blake is considered as one of the best uh, lyrical poets of English language. So his poetical sketches and the songs of innocence and experience contain the best lyrics in English language. And you find that Blake shows a lot of humanitarian concern, and he shows sympathy towards human beings who are oppressed, who are poor, and he also shows concern for the animals and birds. Then in his poems, you find there is there is some strong strong emotions expressed, or there is something called liberty and freedom. So he speaks about the liberty of slaves and the downtrodden people. Then another striking feature that you find in Blake's poetry is mysticism. So when you read his poems, you are taken to the world of thoughts and ideas and visions, and you find that the earth and air, everything is full of spiritual presence. Then there is naturalism. So you can find in his poems that there is love of the child, the love of flowers, hills, streams, blue sky, and everything that belongs to nature. Then there is symbolism. So there are concrete, explicable symbols to show spiritual reality behind nature. Um, for example, a lamb is not just an animal, or tiger is just a fierce animal. It is it is a creation of God. It is it has got the spiritual presence. Then he uses complex symbols in songs of experience. If you go further, we can find, or we can say that the songs of innocence shows that he's a poet of childhood and expresses the innocence of childhood. Then we can also say that he's a poet of grown up because in Songs of Experience uh, he presents the sorrows of the adult life. So um, he is called a precursor. Precursor refers to a poet who comes well in advance, or comes before, and who sows the seeds of some movement. And in a way, Blake sows the seeds for a romantic movement to begin, and that's why he called as pre-romantic, because he comes much before the actual romantic age begins in 19th century. I hope you find this video useful. Thank you for watching.